Miami Local Schools Board of Education regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Cremines? Here. Mr. Siebert? Here. Mrs. Jurnek?
Here.
Mr. Haas?
Here. Everybody could rise to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I forget, let me just make a quick announcement. If you wish to speak on non-agenda items, just so that you know the process, Ms. Coates is standing over here with her hand up with a paper in the air. If you haven't signed up to speak, please do so. Okay, thank you. This time we'll need a motion to adopt the agenda. Would you move? Mr. Cremines?
I'll second.
Ms. Grice? Roll call, please.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Jurnek?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Grice?
Yes.
Okay, at this time I need a motion for the reading of the minutes, January 23rd regular meeting and February 14th special meeting. Mr. Jurnek?
Second.
Mr. Cremines? Roll call, please.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Jurnek?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Grice?
Yes.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Okay, at this time communications and or visitors to the board.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a few presentations here. First one has to do with a school capacity analysis process that we're starting to move through as we recognize that in the next 2 to 3 years we're going to be out of space and then some. So Travis, and along with a few of our other staff, have been working to actually start the process, and we just wanted to communicate to the board about that process and where that process could possibly lead us.
Good evening, I'm Travis Showers, I'm assistant principal at intermediate school. I know we have a number of presentations today, so I'll try and make this relatively quick, but I want to make sure that you all have time to ask questions if you have any of this. So, as you all know so far, we already are looking at our buildings starting to get more and more students within them. As you walk through the buildings, this is something that myself and Mr. Power and Ms. Morgan did on a couple last week. What we notice in some of our buildings is some of our numbers that we look at are actually much larger than we expected, but we also know that with some of our buildings, we've been adding on to them, especially when you look at some of our old buildings like Salem, which was a high school, and then another school, and another school, and they've added things on, changed things. And what we found is that our capacity right now is such that the numbers don't always jive with our official capacity because, well, we're using rooms that weren't initially classrooms. Some of the rooms that we're using now might have been a locker room at one point. Since then, the plumbing's been removed, the floors have been redone, the walls have been redone. You wouldn't know that they weren't a classroom, but originally that wasn't their purpose, but that's because you don't need locker rooms when you have a kindergarten building. So a lot of the space, or maybe you do, but a lot of the spaces that we're using now are ones that were not initially used for that. A lot of the spaces that we have that are being used now for various other things, we're at the same point. What we're looking at with our school capacity planning is basically to create a way that's going to be transparent, that's going to engage all of our stakeholders. That means teachers, that means board members, that means community members, that means possibly even our students at the high school level, depending on what we need for those. But we do want to make sure that it is a process that we have in place. And up till now, what it's been is a lot of different people having different conversations in different places and trying to move forward with what's best. So what we put together so far is kind of a draft, but it's something that we think is starting to come together pretty well. We wanted to share that as we move through the process. Most of you already know this here. I'm not going to read it word for word, but basically, most of you know our history. We have gone through fiscal emergency. We had a difficult time there where a lot of our repairs, a lot of our renovations, a lot of our spaces were repurposed, or sometimes some of those things weren't taken care of as well as we would like because we didn't have the money to do that. Now we're rebuilding, and thanks to our community supporting us, we're finding that we're able to start putting money back into getting those things up to where we need them to be for our students. With that, though, we have people coming back, which is wonderful. We're so glad to see students who have gone to other districts coming back to Little Miami, and we want to keep them here. The problem is, as they come in, we have to find seats for them to sit in. And with that, we're finding that as the enrollment increases, we're also finding that we need to put someone somewhere. On the upside, along with that, we've also found that throughout this time, we've started to build much better relationships with our community. And part of that has been talking with them. Part of them is about opening our facilities. We went through a short time where facilities were not open to the community. Since then, we've actually opened our facilities and created quite a robust system for getting people in and utilizing our facilities in the hours we're not using them for students as much as possible, which has in turn created a stronger bond with our stakeholders. But as we get more people, we have to look at asking for more money, more buildings, more things happen, and it causes stresses. You've seen this before. These are kind of some of those projected growths that were put out there. Depending on where we go in the future years, those numbers are obviously higher or lower. As we're moving forward, we know that we had a bond issue on before, and we have one coming up. With this money, we want to make sure that we're putting the best facilities in place that we can for the students, and that we're planning for the future. Part of what we've done as we've gone through the site planning process is talk to our stakeholders in our community about what they want to see. Part of that is what do they want to see in the interim between now and building buildings. Some of you probably have seen that throughout the time, they ask questions about various alternative calendars, about doing modulars, about using a split session and some other possibilities. And overall, people did not like the ideas of doing these alternative calendars or split schedules due to the fact that it affects the way families work together, it affects jobs, it affects sports, it affects a lot of different pieces that we go through there. Modulars are one that people did like more, but as those who have looked at modulars know, they're costly. The maintenance and upkeep is very difficult, and as we're all aware of right now, security is a big issue with them. If you put modulars, you have to figure out a way to put them in a safe spot. And where with our brick and mortar buildings, we don't have as much of that issue because we have those pieces in place. So as we look at all these options, we want to make sure that all those things are in our minds as we move forward. You can look here, I'm just going to show this for a minute. This is back from the polling that was done during our community meetings. And you can see that when it comes to an alternative calendar going year-round, we have very low numbers of people who are interested in that. During the community meeting, we only had 18% who were in favor of a year-round school, with only 16% interested once we did the online portion. You can see that leasing space is a much higher option, but again, finding that space to lease is difficult. Again, it's costly. Modulars also had a greater popularity. As we've already talked, again, that's a cost. Again, that's a security concern. And looking at what do we do with that once we do have a chance to get brick and mortar buildings in. Split schedule, again, did not have many people who are interested in it. I think a big part of that is the idea of we already have siblings who go to different schools. If now they're going to different schools and on different schedules, it makes more issues with what we do. Also, with students going to school until 6 o'clock at night and not getting home until 8 o'clock on buses, it makes it difficult to do the things that families need to do to have good relationships with their kids. I'm from an elementary background. I was a teacher in the 4th grade. I'm an assistant principal now. I did a short stint up here, which was wonderful. And we still talked about this stuff, but it wasn't quite the same. But for me, it's always been the same. When we're here, we're respectful, we're responsible, and we're being problem solvers. So when we started to think about this, we worked from that framework. So we want to be respectful. We want to implement a process that is transparent, where people can ask questions, where people can give feedback, where people feel like they're part of this solution. This process must include all of our stakeholders, all the folks in this room, and the folks who don't come to board meetings, but want to have their voice heard. We as a district need to be responsible. We need to make the decision-making is based on student opportunity and achievement, while still being fiscally responsible. We would love to give all of the best to everyone, but we still have to make sure that we can pay for it. And we want to be problem solvers. Okay? We have to make sure that our problems are identified, our resources and options, we know what's available. We need to make sure that we have action steps and deadlines so that people know when things are happening and what's being done in order to make sure that we're taking care of our students. Right now, as I said, this is kind of a draft, but right now what we're looking at is we want to build school capacity teams. This would be a building-based team. So depending on where a building is with their numbers, once we do these capacity walkthroughs and we look at the idea of capacity, when we're looking at this, I did put a little red asterisk there because school capacity is different based on ideal. This is where students are just in the spaces that they're supposed to be. And then there's emergency capacity, where we're taking, a computer lab. Taking computers, we're finding ways to get devices into kids' hands, taking that room and subdividing it into classrooms. Okay? It may be a stage that's not being used for performances anymore, and that becomes a teacher staffatorium. So looking at each of these spaces and how we can best utilize it to make sure that we're getting kids in rooms that are possible. So these teams, school capacity teams, are made up of our stakeholders, of our parents, administration, teaching staff, board members, who will be able to research ways to increase capacity, engage the community, and submit a workable plan to the school board. When does this team go in place? It's when we hit a watch status. Okay? When we hit a watch status, the team is when we hit 85% of capacity. Most of our schools are starting to get that point, and we're in this stage. Our administration's monitoring it, and when we're directed, we'll do initial research on possible ways to increase capacity. That's the stage we're at right now in most of our buildings, looking at are we utilizing our space as well as possible. Next stage is as we look forward, we're looking at when a school has reached 90% of capacity at the beginning of the school year. When we expect them to reach 95% capacity in the next school year and 100% in the following 3 years, this is when we'll create a formation of a school capacity team. The exact numbers on that team and how that works will probably be broken down based on how many students are in a school, how many staff are in a school, and how many community members are being served, so that we can make sure that there's ratios out there so that everyone's being able to have a chance to come in and do this. We'd like to also, of course, create some of those opportunities on online surveys and other ways so that folks who do not want to serve on a team will have the opportunity to have their voice be heard. In the end, all of these things are basically just a way for us to make sure that we have something in place and it doesn't sneak up on us, and that we're making sure that everyone knows how are we doing these things. Thank you very much for your time. Any questions?
So we're basically looking to try to be proactive and have a framework in place as we move through and as our buildings fill up and our space gets to be a challenge.
So when do you put together this school capacity?
This will be, right now, based on what we've started walking through, it appears that most of our buildings are below the thresholds that we've kind of set right now. We're still looking at thresholds right now. This is kind of arbitrarily set as far as the 90% and 95%. But the idea would be that if we're looking at especially larger buildings, when you hit 90%, you have a year, 2 years before you start hitting those positions where you're over capacity.
So once you hit the 85%, then you would begin to put together the school capacity team?
The school, that's where we'll start monitoring it. Usually with the school capacity, what we're looking at right now is a capacity team would be when a school hits 90% and is projected to hit 95% the following year, particularly if they're going to hit 100% in any of the following 3 years after that. The idea being, we don't want to start a team, have them do research, have them do work, and then we see a little dip in enrollment and nothing ever comes of it. On the other hand, we don't want to be surprised. We don't want to say, oh, we'll do it when we hit 100%. Because at that point, we're behind the curve.
We know that we're getting close to capacity. Looking in the audience, I see most people here that are members of the staff. They know this, okay? When will this go public? You're kind of preaching to the choir here. I mean, you've done a great job.
As far as our guidelines go,
As far as emphasizing how close we are to having to do modulars or turn the stage into a room or what we have to do to keep kids coming into this district, because once we hit 100% or 95%, we better have more than just a team thinking, hey, this is what we need to do.
yeah.
We better have some place to put those people. Now, I guess my question is, when will the public know this, to where maybe they might want to get on a team to see what, because the public, without passing the bond issue, you know,
Mike, we have, we meet monthly with our district PTOs, and actually we're in the process of starting to communicate this process out there. From my perspective, we have a 3 to 4 year window that we really need to be looking at. So not only do we look at individual building enrollment, but we look at our total district enrollment. So, for example, I can tell you that we're going to run out of space at first and second grade before we run out of space anywhere else. So when we look at that, if we're down at the first and second grade end and we're trying to figure out how to get more space, then it just rolls up through the different grade levels at our other buildings. We have to look at, okay, how do we fix the first and second grade challenge? How do we get more space for first and second grade? Well, if I have space up here at the high school and I have space at the junior high, I start to look at how can I utilize the space up here on this end to free space on the other end. So it doesn't necessarily mean that all the buildings have to be in that, going out of that watch status into forming a team status. So we form teams. We may look at that first and second grade issue and say, well, we got to look at the other buildings and our other space, so that that team that's looking down at that end will then start to look at, well, how do we get that more space, and look at all the options.
I like this plan. You've done a good job. I just think that the public needs to know what's going on. I mean,
And we're in the process of creating that initial capacity, because what we found is, again, the numbers we've looked at before this is based off of original drawings, original designations. If we go out to the public with, we're 110% over capacity at Salem, which is, when you look at initial and like purpose driven, we could be at that point. But if we go to them and say, we're at 110% at Salem, but then people walk through the building, you know, they're gonna see an empty room off in the back, or they're gonna see, and it's not gonna look like 110. So what we're doing right now is making sure that we have a good handle on that actual usage versus original usage. Because if we go to the public now, they're gonna get the wrong message, and we're gonna end up giving them the opposite of what we want. So our goal is, very soon here, we've been walking the buildings. We were in Salem last week. We're looking at the next buildings here in the very near future, and then making sure that we have all the information so that we can then make designations on where is each building and get it directly out to the public at that
that's
point.
what we did before when we turned locker rooms into classrooms.
Yep.
Mr. Showers,
Yes.
about how far do you think we would be from this kind of plan status where we are at 95% enrollment right now?
Right now, it'd be hard for me to say that for sure. And that reason being, we've walked a couple of buildings. We've walked Salem, we've walked the high school. You know, having been at the high school, that we do have some empty rooms, but it's also a matter of, do we have enough room there to move up a full grade? Do we have enough room? That becomes something that Mr. Powers talking. Buildings like Butlerville is always going to be at that capacity because it's a small building, but that's where sometimes it takes redrawing those lines. So right now, we're kind of at this, I would say we're on the tail end of the watch status right now, where we're looking at what is actually going on at the district level, so that then we can prepare teams and have actual information to give to these teams that come in, so that if we get that group together, they don't walk through a building and say, well, you've got 8 rooms available here, and it gives the wrong impression. So as far as when will we hit that, as Mr. Power said, we have a better idea of where we're going to be 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out, but we want to make sure before we start throwing out hard and fast numbers. So I'm not dodging your question, but I will say that I don't have enough information to give you a strong answer.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Christy Borant and Carrie Liette here to talk about the informational piece of our bond issue and detail. And she wanted to take some time to go through and look at our display pieces. These are written to communicate the facts about what it is we're asking the community to support.
So what I passed out are some, what we are proposing to be 30 by 42. If you want to see the actual size, I printed out black and white up here at the actual size. But before we actually send them to the printer and color and get them mounted, I wanted to get these in front of everybody so you guys can review it, look at the verbiage, look at how things are presented. If you want us to make any changes to these, we can very easily do that before we actually spend the money to send them to the printer. So what we have here is essentially a board for each main building that is, or each main building site that is gonna have work done to it in this first phase of the master plan. And then there is a board that is a summary board, which is the first, probably one that you guys have, that just kind of gives a summary so somebody can walk up to that board, see all 4 of those main sites together, and get an understanding of why we're asking for the bond levy and where additions are gonna go or where a new building is gonna go. So the other thing I wanna point out, as we talked about the capacity issues in the building, the way I put in here, you see with each building has its own enrollment projection for that building, okay? And so you can see the same chart that Travis put up that had the low projection and there's likely projection and the high projection. You see that here in bar graph form for each of the buildings. I put a red dotted line for the planned ultimate capacity of that building after this bond levy gets passed and we actually get to build the additions, okay? I also put on each of these charts the OFCC suggested capacity of the existing building, okay? And so where this is gonna differ a little bit from Travis, so Travis is going through Travis is looking at their spaces and Travis is gonna come up with a capacity for each of the schools. When OFCC comes in and they look at your buildings, they look at the total square footage allocated to academic square footage, and they have a calculation that says based on 50,000 square feet, we believe your enrollment should be X, okay? So that's what this blue dashed line is. So when you look at these charts, it essentially indicates that we have hit capacity on just about every single one of our buildings, including the high school. And the reason that is because in a lot of your buildings, you have considerably smaller classrooms, especially in the older ones. So if it's Salem or Butlerville or Mainville, the classroom square footage, even though you still have 25 kids in a class, the square footage of that classroom is considerably less than what OFCC would suggest, okay? So that's one of the reasons for why OFCC is suggesting less of a capacity. There's also things, you know, there's cafeterias. My guess is that right now the high school cafeteria is probably totally maxed out. So that definitely is under capacity, even though we might have some empty classrooms. So I want to make sure that we're okay with the fact that I put the line on here that says OFCC suggested capacity, because it could be a little confusing to some folks when we're going out to the community saying, we haven't created a capacity team yet because we haven't hit the 85%, because that's a different capacity than what I put here being the OFCC suggested enrollment for the buildings. So the bottom line is we're putting more kids in smaller spaces in a lot of the buildings.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, all of these enrollment projections are assuming half-day PKK. So all of those PKK kids have essentially been cut in half when we calculate out that enrollment growth. We won't be able to accommodate full-day kindergarten per our enrollment projections until phase 1B of the master plan, okay? I am not going to read bullet point by bullet point. You guys can do that on your on your own time. This is the main slide, so you can see at the existing Salem Elementary site, we have the new elementary being built behind Salem. Salem stays online because we still need it to be able to house 1,000 kids in it. So until we can execute phase 1B of the master plan, Salem will stay online to be able to house 4th and 5th graders. And that new building going behind will be housing the PK through 1 kiddos, okay? And then we have the intermediate school, where we aren't adding any grades to that building, but we are obviously increasing enrollment size per class, so we do need to start that other wing. We don't have to build out that whole wing yet, but we need to start it to be able to accommodate that increased growth. And part of the plan is also to go ahead and finish out the gym. So in that first phase, we really only built half of the ultimate gym that was desired at that site. At the middle school, that's a sizable addition because we're bringing 6th grade up into that building. So it's going to change from a junior high model, 7-8, to a middle school model, 6 through 8. So that gets a fairly sizable addition to be able to add that whole grade plus the enrollment growth of each of those grades. And then the high school, a couple academic wing additions, as well as the cafeteria addition, and some athletic and additional admin space addition. So these additions on the high school essentially bring this building up to be able to accommodate 1,500 kids, okay? It will start to get tight and over capacity before we get to phase 1B, okay? But we don't want to overbuild this high school piece because phase 1B in the master plan is to build a new high school and this becomes a new middle school. So we're really adding additions to this building, anticipating it becoming an 1,800 student middle school at some point down the road, okay? So this is the summary slide. This chart at the bottom is the same chart we presented to the community in terms of the final master plan. We have one slide, we have one board that is for the PK1 Salem site with some highlights and bullet points, so make sure you read the bullet points and highlight bullet points that I put in. I excelled in math, I did not do very well in verbal, so read it and I will not be offended if you say, Christy, let's rephrase that. Board for the intermediate building, which ultimately will be a 2-3. So we, at some point, will maybe want to think about whether or not that stays being called an intermediate building, because intermediate implies a little bit older.
I would say we probably put primary with the title.
Right. And then we have the middle school, which right now is junior high, but will be middle school. And then we have the high school. So we've spent some time putting together graphics to show what these additions could be. Don't want to put fully rendered looking additions on these buildings because we haven't designed them yet. So we just want to put some massing out there so everybody can get an understanding and a general feel for where the additions are going to go. But they may or may not look like the forms that you see ultimately on those renderings. So that's really all I had to go through. So I just want to make sure you guys take a day or two, go through those, get back to Greg or myself.
2 days is okay.
Well, I know that I've got some antsy folks, where's my window? I've got some antsy folks who would really love these printed out soon.
I just need it,
So how about,
end of the week.
that would be great.
Yeah, we're going to utilize these display boards internally here in each of our buildings when we have activities at night, so that and we have traffic, parents and kids coming into the building. Our intent is this is a communication piece that will be displayed so that people can actually get up and look at this, and we can also hand out information.
One of the things that I would suggest, I mean, just a suggestion, is a travel. One that, some kind of presentation, a larger movie sheet or, something where a board we could put them all on and say for a couple of weeks, it's in Salem Township Library, and then for a couple of weeks, you know what I mean? You move it around Kroger's, and people can,
Trustee meetings.
trustee meetings.
So
yeah.
it could be that we want to print out extra boards of this one
Right,
that summarizes
Right.
all of them.
Just something
And, I mean, maybe it's
but
an
I agree with the
extra,
school, I agree with the.
you
Well,
know,
we
4
would
or 6 of these.
We
Or
were
just
gonna
this
have
one.
some extras made up for the traveling piece when we go out.
Great.
And places other like clubhouses and
Yep.
and other places.
Because we had talked about going to
Mhm.
council meetings and trustee meetings, and that way we could have a picture telling for the school. All right,
So-
thank you.
Take a look at the black and white ones up here as well, just to make sure you're okay with the font size. Obviously, it's small on an 11 by 17. I think it reads, to me, I think it reads okay at the 30 by 42, but,
Sure.
okay? That's all I got.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
I did want to mention, we had a pretty good meeting on the renovation of the building down at Mainville Crossing for the board. We had, I think it was 22 vendors show up for the pre-bid meeting, so
Yeah, we did have a good
Me
showing.
too.
Now, keep in mind that some of these were single prime, some of them were subs that
Oh,
would be
okay.
built,
Okay,
that would be building to the single prime.
Okay.
So it was not 22 single primes.
wow, I was just.
We probably had 4 or 5, we probably had 4 or 5 companies represented
Good.
in terms of single prime. And I'm still hammering on a few more to try to get them to bid as well. So hopefully, we have a good competitive turnout for them, so. So, yeah. So all I'm gonna need to know then, Greg, is how many sets,
okay.
okay? All right, that's what I have. Thanks, guys, appreciate it. Yep. Thank you.
The next presentation's going to keep paperless.
And now Melinda is going to take some time to go through a board docs presentation here to talk about electronic board agendas.
Good evening. We're going to change gears
Good
just
evening.
a little bit. Good
How are
evening,
you?
Mr. Please, I'm good. I'm actually here at your behest. My name is Melinda Briggs, if you don't know. I'm the communication director here at Little Miami Schools, and I'm going to talk to you this evening about Board Docs. Board Docs is a web-based electronic service for boards and committees to conduct the public's business. Try to keep this quick, because we've covered a lot of ground this evening. Web-based means board members, staff, members of the public can access the information from anywhere and from any device. So school districts around Ohio, including districts around us, I have the Career Center's Board Docs page and Keene's Board Docs page captured here so you can kind of see what the homepage itself is. But this is what they use to develop their agendas, run their meetings, and write minutes. So for the benefit perhaps of Mr. Siebert, who may not know, and other people in the audience who are unaware, I wanted to briefly walk you through how a Little Miami board agenda becomes an agenda. So you might see where board docs might be helpful or not helpful. So preparation for a board meeting begins a week or sometimes several weeks in advance, with pertinent items being vetted by administration, whether that's the strategic action team or executive cabinet. And those things during board week, which is the week before the board meeting, are forwarded to me. And this includes personal items from human resources, contracts, financial reports, board reports, and the likes. They're emailed to me or hard copy delivered to me by the close of business on the Wednesday before. So they're sent to me because I'm double-hatted as communication director and as board secretary. So I gather these items and include any board policies that I've seen that need to be updated and create a draft agenda. And then that draft agenda is emailed to administrators for editing. I collect those edits, create another draft, send that out, get any more changes there, and then if that one is blessed, that one becomes the final agenda. And then I can begin preparing board packets. So I'm going to advance one here. So this was taken during the preparation of packets for this past Friday. And this is in my office. So I've got the packet broken into 3 pieces here. What I consider the front of the book, which is the agendas, the minutes, any communication pieces and things like that. The center piece is financials. Those are donations, financial reports, contracts, things like that. And then the third piece is things from Mr. Power, whether they're personnel items or board policies, first readings of things that the board handles So all of these come to me through email, or like I said, hard copies. So I print them out, I assemble them in order with your agenda, and then I run the copies to create board packets, and I create 14 board packets for each regular meeting. And then the copies are either bound in that green folder that you get if the packet is smaller, or in this instance, this packet was 400 pages, so it was bound with the home binder. So that's Bubba, my friend. I don't know how old Bubba is, but he and I are good friends. We've had a lot of history together. So after the packets are created, then they have to be delivered to board members the Friday night before the meeting. So occasionally a member of our maintenance department will be able to deliver those packets before the end of business on Friday. But the approval process doesn't always go that smoothly. Those guys get off at 2:30. So sometimes it's not done by 2:30, and to have them stay runs into overtime costs. So usually it comes down to, after the packets are done and put together, I'm the one who delivers them. And the skills in which the board has located themselves vastly across our 100 square miles. It's a 30-mile round trip. It takes about an hour to deliver.
Melinda, if I could just interject here. My board packet was delivered to a neighbor over on 123 who called me and said, I've got a package over here for you.
Well, I did not get those delivered. That was delegated to someone else, so I apologize.
I thought he did a good job.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
That's what's nice about living where I do. Everybody knows. Everybody says,
Yeah,
yeah, I've
that's
got your
right.
stuff over
That's
here.
right. That's right. Your address is the most challenging one, Mr. Haas. I will tell you that. So if Little Emmett were to begin using board docs, a few things would change. Several steps in this process would be different. So Board Docs provides an online agenda template. And if you can see this is King's board agenda from February 20th. And the agenda on the left, it looks very familiar. It's call to order, pledge of allegiance, different communication pieces, treasurer's piece, things like that. It's very familiar, and it looks very what you're used to seeing. And Board Docs provides these online templates, and each department can build its own section of the agenda. It doesn't have to necessarily run through a gatekeeper. It doesn't necessarily have to do all of the vetting, although the final one would be vetted, of course, by a gatekeeper. But they can build it along the line and kind of cut out the middleman, which is kind of sometimes a bottleneck, perhaps. Here's another section. This is the financial section, the reports that you get from Mr. Gonda. These are all attached online and can be viewed just like the other reports that you receive. I know that Mrs. Grice and Mr. Kameen are using Board Docs at
And we like it.
I like
Center.
it.
We
I
like
fought
it.
it the first time, but I'll cut you in line.
So, and that brings me to one of the points that I have, is that there are pros and cons to this. Let me move through some of these slides. This is also a part of an agenda from the City of Columbus. This is the superintendent section, where he can write lines about what he's going to talk about so the public can see if that pertains to them and they want to attend the meeting. And also attaches documents. I think this has to do with the capital campaign. And then the lines that he writes are amalgamated along with the votes and the motions and things like that, and automatically generates minutes that are attached to the next agenda. Part of my job also is to videotape and to write the minutes, so it all centralizes that into one location. Let's see, what's the next part I wanted you to see? This is the human resources portion, so the personnel that you would see on our agenda is attached with the PDF. So this is another part of Board Docs that I think we've discussed several different times, and that what you see behind it, this is the Chardon Local Schools Board of Education, and they're using Board Docs. And behind them is projected part of the agenda, the exhibits that go along with the agenda. So the gentleman all the way to the right is kind of the captain or the moderator, and I'm not sure if he's the treasurer or not, but he keeps the meeting flowing. You can reorder the agenda, you can capture the votes and the minutes, and it's projected so people can see what the board is looking at. And I know we've had discussions about that before. So, there's one more feature about Board Docs that I think is pretty interesting, especially in this day and age, and this is called the meta search. So any organization, commission, board that uses Board Docs is included in this meta search. So the the webinar that I watched, it was very interesting. It was hosted by Chardon, and they used metasearch and they searched the word transgender. So any commission or board who had taken any action or who had done any work or consideration or looked at a policy or procedure that was entered into their board docs, you could see that and kind of see where other organizations were. And they're, you know, we deal with similar things. So the meta search was really an eye-opening thing. It helped me with the policy issues. Any other topic that might come up, you could have a wealth of knowledge to draw from when you make decisions. So the pros, gradual elimination of that paper process, definitely more internal efficiencies, and the ability to project that information at meetings. We're getting ready to move into a new board space that I know will have at least one screen that we could use this with. And I think, you know, we've had several different requests about being more transparent with board procedures, and I think that would offer that feature. Cons, I'm going to use the same first line again, gradual elimination of paper agendas and packets. If board members are not necessarily, or even members of the public are not necessarily comfortable with technology, it's not a barrier to getting more information. We can always print out detailed agendas, so they will get something similar to what we use now, but it is not, it is taking that long drawn out process to fill that agenda and to get it out to people away. And another one of the cons is the cost. So I'll show you the pricing. Board Docs Pro, which has the meeting control panel, which is the piece that's projected, it's $10,600 per year. And the first year is an additional $1,000 for my setup fee. So it's pricey. That includes 2 days of on-site training for anyone. Could be me, could be, I'd definitely be all board members.
It was all of us.
It was all you guys. So, and that's what it would be. And then unlimited online training if you ever needed brush ups. Board Docs LT is the light version. It does not have the meeting control panel. It does not have some of the more powerful features. But you can manage paper documents online with that. So the other cost that I wanted to talk about was a little bit, it's an intangible cost, and that's the cost of time. In a typical year, the board has 12 meetings, you know, 1 a month. But last year, we had 25 regular meetings, special meetings, work sessions. That didn't necessarily count the listening sessions, focus groups, things like that. So from a personal standpoint, you're not getting the best bang for your buck when it comes to communication, because oftentimes I'm standing in front of a copier. So I wanted you to know both sides of the story. If it were me to make a recommendation, it's not necessarily, but if I were to make a recommendation, I would recommend the Board Docs Pro and get us up and running by the time we move into the new board space. So, any questions?
No,
I would love to hear what your feelings are about it.
well, like I said, I fought it the first time around because the computers make me look foolish. But after learning and sitting down, the Docs Pro like we have at the Career Center, hey, I learned to do it, and I can follow right along.
And that's something.
I can get on at home before I go to the meeting and view it and see what's going to go on. And I like it, you know. The cost, yeah, it's pricey,
It's pricey.
but
If you figure paper and time.
yeah. So I'm all for it this time around. So that's why I suggested it to you.
It's easy to use.
It is
Well,
really.
You can make, so what it would take would be board members having their own device or a district provided device. And you have the ability to make private notations on your documents that are not public record. So if you are one to mark up your packet, I know I'd be making notations as I read through it. You can still do that on Board Docs. So, what other?
A couple questions. First, let's say you do make the notes on your agenda. Once you get to the meeting, can you pull your specific agenda up that has your notes on there?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that there are actually different copies living out there.
That's correct.
You mentioned stakeholders or members of the community being able to access this. Would it be after it's finalized, then?
Good question. Great question, let me back up so you can see how this is.
Because you had made a comment that the superintendent would put something in there, and then they could say, well, I want to be there for that particular part of the meeting. So they would see it as it's being billed as well.
Correct, well, not necessarily. So there are different levels of permissions.
Okay.
So internally, as
That's
we're
my
building
question,
it, the board could see it being built.
Right.
And you can have input. For instance, if Mrs. Coates's piece was done on the Wednesday before, she could load that up, and she's going to chuckle because we always have.
He gets done about 4 times that day.
That's right. So you can see it being built. However, when it's time, this is the actual public agenda, we can release that and make it public. And if you see, well, that one doesn't have it, but
So they could see the agenda before the meeting?
correct,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
The
Correct.
agenda, no notes or anything, right? I mean,
Not
they can't
notes
see
that-
personnel stuff or anything. in
No,
there.
exactly, and that's what you can do as well with the meeting control panel. You don't want to project all of the pieces of a packet,
Right.
there's, maternity leaves and
Sure.
things like that.
Yeah.
You can set different permissions, so the public can see exactly what you're working on, but not those nitty-gritty details, exactly.
The second question I had is percentage of time. Just a round number, how much of your time, is it 5% to put the board packet together? Is it 10% to put the board packet together?
It is
What- just-
usually 3 days before a meeting and 2 days after a meeting. So I'm spending, out of a month, I'm spending 25% of my time on board business. Last year, when you all had so many meetings, I was a board secretary that did communication on the side. I was juggling a lot. And we were on the ballot. Well, before we were on the ballot. We're on the ballot again this year, and I'm looking at that again, knowing where the need is, and knowing that I need to find some efficiencies in order to balance that. And that's why I've been researching this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes?
We will be able to go back and search minutes from a previous month meeting or even a year. We can
Yes.
find out what we paid for
Yes.
whatever service.
And that's exciting. I'm glad you asked that because everything is searchable. Every document, everything that we place online is searchable. So we can go back and say, oh, that happened on, July 13th of 2008. Yes. And that's not necessarily something that we have now. We have the minutes online and everyone can download them. They're not searchable. And we have board minute books that go back, to time immemorial, and you still have to leaf through each page. And this would make it searchable. Yeah. Great question. I'd forgotten that. Anybody else? Thank you for your time. I'd look for some input as to whether or not you'd like to see this next month's agenda. Since I'll be working with Bubba on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, all right. At this time, any community comments on agenda items? No one signed up at this time. We will entertain the treasurer's reports and recommendations.
First off, I'd like to ask for the board's approval of the monthly financial reports for month ending January 2018.
I'll move.
Ms. Janae, Mr. Green, you want a second? Okay. All right, any questions, comments on there? Anything you want to touch base on there, Terry?
I'll include is 2 different budgetary reports from the general fund, which is our operating fund, which is reflected in our 5-year forecast, and then also an individual fund summary of each fund in the district, and then also a by line item revenue section for the general fund also. And a bank reconciliation for you.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Janae?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Joyce?
Yes.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, under item 9, I ask for the board's approval of the contracts as listed.
I'll move.
Ms. Rice? Mr. Green? Terry, I noticed one of those on there
Yes.
was revenue, the acreage.
Yes, that's our 44 acres.
Farmland, yes.
That is the land that the district owns on the corner of Ford and Zorn.
Very nice. Any questions?
Always nice to get money in.
That's what jumped out.
That one's not going out.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Joyce?
Yes.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Jernay?
Yes.
Thank you. Under item 10, I ask for the board's approval of the real estate purchase.
I'll move. I'll second.
Ms. Janae, Ms. Gray? Okay, and this is the real estate purchase for the 10 acres that touches the high school here.
That is correct.
Right next door. I did have a question. I just wanted to throw this out. The current buildings that are there, have we gotten the pricing on what it would take to raise those buildings?
Actually, I just met a demo vendor at the bid meeting the other day.
Okay.
With the acquisition, we would certainly look at removing those so that it's not a safety issue.
I wondered,
Look to develop.
wondered about the fire department as well. Just a
Yeah.
thought. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Cremini,
Yes.
Mr. Seaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Haas.
Yes.
Next, I ask under item 11, the board's approval of the lease renewal with Rivers Bend Urgent Care.
I'll move.
Mr. Cremins?
Second.
Ms. Grace?
This is actually a new lease, starts January of this year, and goes for 5 years up through 2022. And the overall revenue that'll be coming in over that 5-year period is just a little under $264,000.
Over 5 years.
Over a 5-year period, yes. Anywhere from 49 to 55 years.
And that's, let me just ask a quick question. This is just the one tenant?
Yes, that's correct.
And
Cincinnati Eye Institute's lease is up at the end of May.
Man, okay.
Are they leaving?
No, they want to stay, and they actually have an updated lease proposal from us right now.
Okay,
We're working with that.
great.
Thanks.
All right. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cremini,
Yeah.
Mr. Seaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mrs. Grice.
Yes.
And next, under item 12, I ask for the board's approval of a donation of 148 Dell laptop computers from GE Aviation.
I'll move.
Okay. Mr. Cremins? All right, very nice.
Yes, I'd like to thank GE Aviation for donating those to the district as they are much needed.
Yes. Okay, yes, definitely, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Seaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mrs. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Cremini.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian.
No, Terry, just a
Yes.
quick question on
Yes.
those. Where will those be utilized?
Actually, they'll be divided out. Mrs. Morgan, we were just talking about this earlier, she's probably got the breakdown in her head, so.
There she is, okay.
So,
I was looking in the
we
back.
will take 60 of them, and they go to the junior high. I'm pointing to Allison, so you should know that's where they're going. They're going to the junior high. The junior high, we're taking their Chromebooks and pushing them down. We're to the intermediate school. The intermediate school is getting some as well. We're taking some of those Chromebooks and pushing them on down so that we have a better distribution of devices across the system, keeping the Chromebooks in the lower grades and the laptops in the higher grades.
And GE Aviation does this annually, and so we got our name in the request for, again, doing the same thing with them next year.
Very nice. And you said 60 were going down, so the other 80 are?
60 at the junior high, 90 at the intermediate school.
90 at the intermediate, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gunn.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, superintendent's reports and recommendations.
I'd ask the board's approval for all the personnel items listed under item A.
I'll move.
Mr. Cremins,
I'll second.
Ms. Jordan. Questions, comments? No? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mrs. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Cremini,
Yes.
Mr. Seaver.
Yes.
Thank you. Would ask the board's approval for an updated handbook, item B.
I'll move.
Ms. Grice,
Second.
Mr. Cremins. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mrs. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Cremini,
Yes.
Mr. Seaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jordan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would ask the board's approval for permission to make application to the Eastern Cincinnati Conference League.
I'll move.
Mr. Cremins,
I'll second.
Ms. Jordan. Questions?
Yes. Okay, we go ahead and submit this application. We're still in this swamp for 2 years, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so these other teams say, hey, we want Little Miami to come and join us. Do we have to go and join them?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Do we have to go in to this conference,
Even though we've
even though we've
applied.
applied?
If we have applied and been accepted, it is their understanding that we will then join.
We asked for clarification, so basically, if we apply and they offer us membership, their expectation is we're making a commitment to move if they accept us. I did talk with the SWAC League president last night. He gave me a call, and we were talking. Of course, he's very concerned about losing Little Miami. I got a sense that our current league is, if anybody leaves, we're in a rather precarious circumstance as far as the league continuing to survive.
So how do our coaches feel about this?
Yeah, that's my next question. Nate?
Do I have the floor?
Yep.
Well,
Be honest.
I can only give you my honest opinion. I spoke with Greg, and I've been very honest with him. And again, I just want to be honest with everybody. I think there are pros and cons to obviously this move, and I think we're all aware of most of those. You know, I understand both of them, especially as an administrator, I understand them. As the AD, I understand them. And I would understand them in those roles. I think my hat right now that I'm wearing is as the head football coach and the head coach and leader of the football program only. With that being said, I think we've created and worked hard to create a great atmosphere on Fridays. We've worked hard to create a better program, football program that is. My fear is that, in addition, there has not been a football parent come to a board meeting to express complaints about the program. I think that's important. In 2.5 years. With that being said, I think unless there's a full commitment to improving facilities and giving us a better chance to compete, we're going to be playing the type of schools at the top echelon of the SWAC week in and week out. And I think it's okay to compete with, and it'd be fun to compete with the Kings week 3 or week 10. But going through the gamut of those schools week 1 through 10 would be detrimental, and I think we would go backwards football-wise. That's just my honest opinion, and I want to be forthright with that. I respect any decision that's made, and I'll do my best, but that's my honest opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Do you have a question? This question? Okay. All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Grice?
Oh, why did you have to start with me? No.
No? No. Mr. Cremines?
We can't get out of it if we accept, if they were accepted, right?
I emailed and asked specifically, and they said if
Mike's
we
one.
fill out the application, we submit it, and it's approved, they are understanding that we will.
And I'll say no.
No, Mr. Cremines? Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Trene?
No.
No. Mr. Haas?
No.
No. 4-1.
Thank you. Item D, ask the board's approval for the Business Advisory Council alignment with the Montgomery County ESC. There are probably a couple of you that might want to consider
Abstaining.
So the other two, I need a motion, and, well, but I can't make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Cremines?
Wait.
Second.
Second?
Mr. Seibert? Okay, I can't make neither, I can't make either one, so.
Board president.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Trene?
Abstain.
Abstain. Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Grice?
Abstain.
Abstain. 3-0.
Thank you. And then I would ask the board's approval on item E, the special ed coordinator job description.
I'll second.
Ms. Grice, second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Joyce?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay, at this time, new business, informational items, our updated board policies, the first readings. Also, at this time, we have the Warren County Career Center report.
Okay. We had one board member, Lori Raleigh from Franklin, was congratulated for being honored by OSBA for 15 years of service. And Esther Larson, our person from Lebanon, she's the ACTE School Board Member of the Year for 2018. Also, we have a new resource officer. We've had one for a couple years, and he decided he wanted to move on, and so we have a new resource officer. Another thing, we kind of congratulated three of the people, Mary Paulman, Jackie New, and Mikhail Giambro. They raised over $16,000 to help 81 students during the holidays. It was for student fees, personal gifts, and gift cards, and some of them, that was the only gift that they received. We also, our English instructor presented touching base with the teachers, highlights lessons and accomplishments of our teachers. We got a commendation from, our treasurer's office got a commendation from the auditor of the state for excellence in financial reporting. We reviewed new career tech content standards, and we held a first reading for our calendar, and let's see, we accepted donations for public safety and fire, $300 for the neediest kids also. I gave an update on student achievement, and we have Teen Coding Challenge and Business Professionals of America. We have winners that are going on to compete. And the superintendent reported on enrollment applications, and it's way up compared to what we usually have. So we're going to run out of space too, is what's going to happen. So anyway, it was a good thing.
And the other thing I'd like to add, we attended the National Technical Honor Society induction, and Will County had by far the biggest number of kids enrolled in the inducted.
We
I think we
had
had 30 kids inducted.
I had the flu. So, anyway, Career Center is doing well.
All right, thank you, Ms. Grace. At this time, our next board meeting is March 27th here at the Little Miami High School Media Center. This time, community comments on non-agenda items. Ms. Coates.
The first one's Ray Hauser.
Thank you.
And just so that everyone knows, it's a 3-minute, it is a 3-minute time limit, so.
Also do it 1 minute.
So I just wanted you to know that. We didn't want you to.
Mr. Power, High School.
Okay.
So, the reason I'm here this evening is because I want to speak to you about the Faster Saves Lives program, with which I know you're familiar, and voice the support that you have for the community to move forward with this. I'll start with this. This is a picture of a security photo in June of 2015, and this is my Uber receipt. That's the path that I drove with my wife and my kids, as we went right past that church as Dylan Roof walked in and then murdered a room full of people. So this happens, and you can be right there and not even know it. So to think that this couldn't happen in our schools is foolish. We need to think about what we can actually do. And you're in a position where you can actually do something. Right? The Ohio laws are in place that allow you to make that decision. You can save time, you can save lives, you can provide the training. And the alternative is you can let children die. So we know the signs don't work. We have them on the building. We know they don't work. We know the laws don't work because they're breaking the laws anyway. The weapon technology hasn't changed in 100 years. It's the same technology, but the society has changed, and we have to change in response to that. We have one officer on our premises. Broward County had 4, and it could be a training deficiency, it could be a communications error, whatever it was. We need a layered approach. Our law enforcement is training. Think about how much better our schools could be prepared for a true security incident with that training that's going on at spring break in the junior high, if our teachers that we're trained and we're capable, were present at that training and able to participate. The teachers are willing. In Butler County, Sheriff Jones offered up free training and got 300 responses, but he expected 20. He had to close it down. We also look at the teachers that throw themselves in front of bullets to save kids. There's a quote from a woman who went through the FAST program, 110-pound female, and she said, I know I'm the last line of defense, and they want to kill me because they want to kill my kids, and I can't let that happen. And she goes through that FASTER program and goes through that training. And it's a high standard they're held to. If you don't know this, law enforcement is held to a standard of 20 out of 25 shots for the OPATA training. 80%. That's a low B. This program requires 93%. You can miss 2 shots, and they make you shoot harder shots than the teachers actually have to, than the law enforcement actually has to shoot. So they're held to a higher standard, and they're proving themselves capable. And lastly, in the interest of time, I'll finish with this. I'm going to read you 2 lists of schools. Pearl High, Appalachian Law, and Parker Middle School. Those schools had somebody there to respond, and they stopped a tragedy. You know Columbine, you know Sandy Hook, and now you know Parkland. And I don't want to hear Little Miami added to that list, and you don't either. The schools that won't take action are essentially telling the teachers, we require you to die, hide, to hope, lock up, and potentially die. So you have the support of the community. Every parent I talk to, those that couldn't be here tonight that wanted to be, love the idea. I've talked to your school resource officer, loves the idea. I'm glad to hear our law enforcement in this area is supportive of the idea. So now it's just up to you to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kutch, you said that was first?
Yes, next is Michelle Hauser.
I'm here tonight. My 8th grade son, who's at the junior high, would have liked to present this himself, but he was sick today. So I am reading what he put down on paper for us. So he felt it was important enough to raise his perspective as a student to supplement what my husband just spoke about and empowering people within the school buildings to help students if running and hiding is not an option. So my son Ryan, I know as a student that there are many redundant layers and systems to protect from school fires, including fire alarms, maps with planned routes in every room, fire extinguishers in many places, regular drills and plans, and fire-resistant buildings. So while all we have to protect from school shootings are locked doors and hopes and prayers, we don't even have a dedicated police alarm. I feel we need to make other ways to protect students in ways that stop the shooter and not just running away. Children are our future, and some people say they are our most valuable resource. I would say that too. So why aren't we protecting them as we do our musical artists, celebrities, and politicians? These famous faces have many more people that don't like them, and still less politicians and other celebrities were murdered in 2017 than people killed in school shootings. What is the main difference here? And he did put it in bold letters. Armed guards. I think our schools should have the same luxury in the form of allowing teachers to be armed. History has repeated itself. It has shown that as long as there are crazy people that want to hurt people, they will find ways to do so. And our action to prevent the next disaster has always happened after these terrible events. So we should take action now instead of later by giving our teachers a chance to fight back. It's from Ryan. He turns 14 tomorrow.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tori Tillman and Trinity Cox.
both 10th graders at Little Miami High School, and I've been a student at Little Miami since April 28th, 2015. On my first day, there was a bomb threat at the junior high, and the students were evacuated in 2 hours in the high school gym. I appreciate everything the school has done, everything the school staff and the administration has done to protect the students, including evacuations on that day. However, with the growing threat of gun violence, we need to do more.
On February 16th of this year, there was an incident in the district. Yet, students were unaware of the situation and parents did not get an email until 2:45 that day. Currently dealing with serious threats is an issue that is not going away anytime soon. So the question we pose to you is, how are we going to keep the school safe? Since the incident in Florida, it seems that some members of the Little Miami community are not taking the situation seriously. There have been jokes and there have been a lot of threats. They may think the possibility of a shooting happening in our community is very low. But let us remind you that the tragic school shooting that happened in Parkland, Florida. Last year, according to a CNN article, Parkland, Florida was labeled the safest city in Florida. This shows that something like this can happen anywhere at any time. We need to work towards a community that is connected and takes these threats seriously.
As members of the Little Miami Sandy Hook Promise Club, we want to let the district know that the club is here, that the club was created in 2016 for exactly this reason, and Promise Club feels extremely underutilized. As a voice speaking for the Little Miami students, we believe that our safety needs to be of the utmost subject right now. Our club is offering its services to create a more connected environment. As students, Trinity and I feel the district should look into adding an extra therapist for students who feel socially isolated and students who feel alone, establishing a peer counseling group, and work in more conjunction with the Sandy Hook Promise Club. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, very much. And that was called the Sandy Hook Promise Club? That's it? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone that had something to say, that we appreciate that. We do appreciate the feedback. Okay. This time I need a I'm sorry. We're going to move into
Before you go to
yes.
that,
Yes.
I did want to alert the board to a possible special board meeting. We've got bids that are due. I think we probably will want to look at a special board meeting to have you award the bid on the renovation of the board office prior to the next board meeting. The bids are due on Tuesday, March the 20th, which is a week before our regular board meeting. And if we can get a day or two to review the bids prior to bringing the recommendation to the board, I was thinking maybe looking at Thursday, March the 22nd, as a possible special board meeting to award the bid. We could do 6:30 at the intermediate school. Oh, 7. We can do 7.
Which second?
22nd, 7.
7 o'clock?
Mr. Seaman? Yes. Good day?
6 what time?
She said 7.
At 7 o'clock on the 22nd at the intermediate school conference room.
Everybody's good with that?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow morning, real estate thing.
Yes, tomorrow morning is the real estate breakfast.
8:30.
At 8:30. Okay, this time we're going to move into executive session.
I'll move.
Ms. Grice?
Is there anything on the agenda after executive session?
I'm sorry.
Did Mike second? Okay, got it. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Janae?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mrs. Garza?
Yes.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
All right.
Thanks.